r/ask Reddit. Teachers of Reddit. What clicked about a pupil after meeting their parents? I notice quite a few negative stories here. Well, here is a positive one where it clicked. I have a student who is really friendly, really smart, and amazing at English. I am an ESL teacher abroad. She is always really friendly to me and always really hardworking. She constantly helps other kids in class who struggle with the material and overall just a great girl. I met her dad once at a school event and holy goodness was this guy awesome. He was a really genuine and generous character and even invited me to get to know different parts of the city with his family. I could definitely tell they had a close bond and that he had raised her really well. Just an example of good people raising other good people. Edit. A word. This is from back when I was doing my student teaching. There was a girl in one of my classes that never did any work in class, turned in her homework late, and would ignore huge projects until literally the last minute and then ask to come in for help every day at lunch after school to make up for the missing work. Eventually I caught her cheating on a quiz. She had written down the answers, put them in the plastic cover of her binder, and put her binder down by her feet. I took her quiz, gave her a 0, and told her that cheating wasn't allowed. About a week later, we had parent-teacher conferences. The girl came with her mother, who took out every assignment that had been graded and handed back, and proceeded to argue with me over individual points. Things along the lines of, well, she spelled it all right, so that deserves some credit, right? Or she circled the right answer, so she should still get some credit, when that right answer had been crossed off and then another answer had been selected. This took nearly an hour to go through. Finally, the mother brought up the quiz, and I told her about the cheating. The mom said, well, you should give her some credit on it. She was pretty clever to think of that trick. From then on, I made sure to schedule meetings with myself, my mentor teacher, and the principal present. This girl in prep already showed traits of a narcissist sociopath. She was an extremely clever but lacked empathy, manipulative, blatantly lied, stole and so on. Yes, this might just sound like characteristics of any child, but there was definitely something different about her. Anyway, met her mum who refused to accept that her child would do anything wrong. And when the child admitted she stole a girl's bracelet because she wanted it, her mum said that's okay, we can go buy you one on the way home. College freshman was constantly late, didn't turn work in on time or at all, etc. She had an excuse for every single thing. I wasn't even asking. She just volunteered excuses. After getting a D in my class, which was frankly a bit generous as her actual grade was a high F, her mother called me. I wasn't allowed to discuss a student's performance with anyone, including their parents, and I told her as much. Her mother then, unprompted, gave me a long string of excuses for her daughter and, oddly, herself. I kind of thought, oh, that makes sense now. Not a teacher, but I do volunteer work for a program designed to help students who are habitually truant. Had one middle schooler who was super bright, genuinely seemed to love school, got great grades, but was absent about half the time. He was very evasive about why he wasn't coming to class, and I honestly didn't put him high on my list because he was doing fine even with the missed days. When I was finally able to get a social worker to go by his house, it turned out his single mother was having seizures and didn't have any healthcare, so she couldn't get treatment for them, and the kid was staying home to take care of both her and his younger brother. I felt just terrible for the kid having to be so adult while still in middle school. I was that kid. Father worked shifts, and when he was home he was doing backyard car repairs to help make ends meet. Not because he didn't earn a good living. He actually did. But because my mother was a gambling addict. Instead of addressing the problem, he focused on solving the symptoms. I went to school from an unheated house with a mother still in bed and no breakfast in freezing weather with no coat because she spent the money on gambling. Went for years without medical treatments for the same reason. No toothpaste. No hair conditioner, no haircuts, old shoes, socks and underwear with holes. All because anything she could make us do without went to gambling. Pay was done in the frigid school gym in bare feet and a shirt because gym shoes and sweatshirts cost money that could be used to make bets instead. One day the vice principal called me to her office. Not to reprimand me, but to give me the optional pieces of uniform I didn't have, like a coat and a school blazer. They were the options without which you froze half to death as you walked or biked several miles to school. She didn't make a big deal out of it. She simply met a need. Her act of kindness lit a spark in me. To this day, almost 40 years later, I still put money, time and hard work into caring for others and charity work. I'm the mum who will volunteer at school, quietly contribute anything the teachers are short of. That person, not for recognition or thanks. In fact, I am embarrassed if you do that. It's because nearly 40 years ago someone cared. Not a teacher but a student. In kindergarten we had this kid who was really odd and smelled funny, but he seemed cool, so we would hang out at recess. I had a birthday party and it was only supposed to last maybe a few hours. All of the kids but him went home fairly early, but it was really late and his parents still hadn't showed up. I was getting tired and wanted to go to bed, so my parents set up some blankets for us in the living room and we had a sleepover. At 2 AM his parents finally show up, after multiple calls with no answer. Instantly I realized what was up. Even as a small child I knew these parents were the definition of white trash. They reeked of alcohol. My mom's side of the family is full of alcoholics, so I knew what it smelled like. They also told some bullshit story about how they had new tires of their car and the speedometer showed the wrong speed and they got pulled over and some other bullshit. It all clicked why he acted so odd and why he smelled. It was cigarette smoke. At the start of first grade he never showed up, and like a month into the year he was there for a few days. Then randomly in third grade he showed back up again for a few weeks. I never saw him again after that. I looked him up on Facebook a while back and it looks like he is following in his parents' footsteps, up falling into every white trash stereotype. I asked my parents about this kid a while ago and they said that the reason he wasn't with us in school for a few years is that he got taken away by Child Protective Services, which my mom called. Then he came back the W times because that's when his parents got him back, but he was taken away again and that's why he left us. I feel bad for the kid because at first he was really nice, but over time as I saw him again he became more mean and rude. Such shitty parents. Obviously an extreme example here, but I had a student, an 8th grader, who was quiet to the point of absolute silence, but who did extraordinarily well with the written word. A few times, he showed up with bruises, which I naturally reported, but he was adamant that they were from other students. Surprisingly, his parents came in for PTC and seemed relatively normal, until he went to speak for himself and I saw his father grip his arm so tightly that it left a mark. I understood immediately that his parents basically didn't let him speak at all for fear of reprisal. A few weeks afterward, the kid stopped showing up to school, and word eventually got around that he got caught up in a meth lab explosion in his parents' house and was covered head to toe in 2nd and 3rd degree burns. He came back a month or so later, covered in bandages. He couldn't move, write, or really do anything without excruciating pain. I'd never cried so hard as I did that day. Sorry, I know it got off track, but there are certain stories that stick with you. Didn't actually meet the parents, but was recently told about the parents of a 9th grader I have. Apparently, the dad is super verbally abusive, constantly belittling the son, like, bordering on reportable abuse, but just not quite over that line, his former teachers said. This kid acts out, is constantly seeking positive attention, has no self-esteem, despite being pretty smart and capable. It all just makes a lot of sense now. Edit. For all the people who are saying that I should report it, I have not personally witnessed the abuse, nor have I even met the parents in question, so it wouldn't be appropriate for me to report it anyway. In fact, in my state, there are penalties if I were to do so. But moreover, I trust my colleagues who have taught him and have witnessed the negative interactions with the dad, and I believe that they have the requisite experience and judgment to have been able to make the determination not to report the father. Edit 2. Thank you all for your concern though, and I'm very sorry for those who have gone through something like this. I'm the kid. When I was growing up, I'd get pulled aside and asked if I smoked. I'm talking elementary school. My parents, much like someone else had mentioned, smoked in the house with the windows closed. I was heavy, really heavy, with a lot of confidence issues that still stick around today. I had problems with anger growing up, not so much now, but I was an excellent student when you could inspire me to focus or found something I was passionate about. They'd meet my parents, and nod to me. My dad, who would work swing and overtime every day almost to support my mom's 2-3 pack a day habit at the time. Now it's only 1 pack. Supposedly, my mom, who basically looked strung out on drugs, but was really just taking so many antipsychotics and pain meds that she might as well have been. My parents tried to be supportive of me, but I'm not sure they really knew how. I'd keep a bottle of Febreze on me starting in middle school because the questioning from teachers got worse. I'm graduating college in June, even though it's taken me twice as long as it should have, mostly because of money, a lack of guidance, and my own mental BS. I got a job working in student government for the first time ever and was sent to a conference in Washington, DC by my college last year. I worked my first non-minimum wage job this summer and got invited to come back with another raise. To my 4th and 5th grade teacher, if you're reading this, I'm okay. I did it, and I hope your ladybug collection has grown. Edit. Holy moly, RIP my inbox, and thank you to the lovely stranger with gifting my first gold. But thank you so much for all of the lovely comments. I'm trying not to cry on the train to my vacation. It means the world to me. One female organ student I had always wore dresses that were very revealing, both above the knee and in cleavage. When she'd sit on the organ bench for a lesson, it was almost embarrassing. I wondered why she'd insist on dressing this way until I met her parents. Her mother dressed identically, to the point where other parents would study her movements as she walked across the room at a reception after student recitals. It was a classic case of like mother, like daughter, and her father seemed to revel in it. A girl in my 7th grade class was really bright, but almost never turned in her homework, so she just skated by on test scores. One time, I commended her for helping another student who didn't understand the assignment, only to realize that night that she didn't do her own. I called her parents and quickly realized they're the type that have an answer for everything, and were all too quick to put the responsibility on me, as if I should stand over their daughter to make sure she works. I turned to ask the girl what she thought, since she had been completely quiet, and her parents began to answer for her again. I put my finger, index, up and said, "No, you've had your turn. I want to hear what she thinks about all this." Well, she apparently really appreciated that, because she went on for about 30 minutes about all her views on education. At the end, I kept her parents quiet and told her that if she's willing to talk such a big game, she needs to back it up and do the work without her parents or me interfering. She didn't miss another assignment all year. Proud teacher moment. My wife called a student's parents to talk about the kid swearing all the time and general bad attitude. After explaining to the mom why she was calling, I told that goddamn kid a million ducking times to watch his ducking mouth. Jesus Christ, wait till his ducking daddy gets home. Had a kid that you looked at and it was very much a lights are on but nobody is home sort of feeling. I teach high school, so sometimes that's just the phase they're in, but this one was basically living perpetually in that mode. Kid has an IEP, Individualized Educational Plan, which is a legal special education doc. I can't reveal what was in there, but it was, suffice to say, generic. So it feels like there are pieces missing. Days go on. This kid is the gold standard of something is up. Completely illegible handwriting to the point it doesn't resemble writing. You ask about what we are doing in class and the answer is so random and off task that if the kid didn't look and act fairly childlike for their age you would assume hardcore drug use. But this kid, if anything, had Ralph Wiggum jeans and didn't know what drugs were. Mom comes to back to school night, which is supposed to be 5 minutes with the class of parents. A nice how do you do and everyone moves on. She corners me, immediately starts telling me about her concerns that I don't fully appreciate her miracle baby who was mute until 8, didn't walk until 4, walked backwards first, and had an IQ of about 60. They told her this kid would never make it in school and didn't. I think you just couldn't tell anything was ever delayed, because this is a miracle. That's why she blocked all mention of those conditions from the documents, because people would never guess otherwise. Miracle. When the word miracle comes up from a parent it always explains a lot. 0.0. We had a crazy kid in 6th grade a few years back. I mean, he was the type of kid you assume will probably go on a shooting spree at some point. He was diagnosed with all sorts of acronyms acrostics, so he was on a ton of meds. On his medicine he was defiant, but manageable. Typical class clown type stuff. Off his medicine, oh man. We could all tell when he came in the building whether or not he had taken it. It was in his eyes or something. He routinely refused to do anything and had to be physically carried, limp-bodied, to the principal's office a few times. He hit a teacher once and called another one a beach to her face. In the same day, we had parent-teacher night and his mom came in. She was 26, he was 12. It became clear to us that the reason he was off meds so much was because she was taking them. She had also just had another baby, so he was acting out more because of that. His mother had a very low IQ, clearly, and so did he. He ended up getting sent to alternative school eventually. Never saw him again. I had a second grade student who was constantly getting into pretty serious physical altercations with others, stabbing kids with pencils, slapping girls across the face, etc. The first time I met his mom was when she came up to the school threatening to choke me because I said her son couldn't come on a field trip to the pumpkin patch because he was too violent. When I was student teaching, second grade, there was a little boy in the class who was just a genuinely friendly and sweet kid. He struggled a little academically when it came to learning to read and his handwriting had some problems. But he was the hardest worker and never got frustrated or thought that we was stupid like many other students with those difficulties do. He was well liked by everyone and didn't have a mean bone in his body, and he was extremely well adjusted, despite the fact that his parents were divorced. I ended up meeting both parents separately during field trips. Both parents are extremely involved in his life and put him ahead of any of their problems they have with each other. They genuinely want what's best for him and it shows. The dad takes him out to the sports bar for boys' night where they share root beer, which I thought was really cool. Both parents genuinely are awesome people with great attitudes and it definitely shows in their kid. Student teaching for high school seniors and juniors, I had this guy that was a shady 80. No specific problems, just very low intelligence. But this guy worked his ass off. Never a late assignment. Did all extra credit that was offered. Usually extra credit is done by those who don't need it and ignored by those who do need it. Made flashcards for like every test and quiz even though I never said to. Model student. Just had low test scores. If it was an assignment that could be done with time and effort, he did it. Unfortunately tests aren't like that and that's where he had the most problems. Back to school night comes along and I meet his dad. And Co in the Marines. Courteous, well-spoken, and completely knowledgeable about all of his son's upcoming assignments and grades. Totally made sense. Kid is getting through with hard work and dedication and pulling off a B average. Amazing what support from parents can do. In most cases, a kid like this would probably be failing most of his classes. One of my students is safe playing. He won't try any new ideas while doing maths and would frequently look out to applying some formulas. I used to think that he genuinely is less creative than others, but at times, particularly when playing games, he would show bursts of real brilliance. When I met his mother, it clicked why. The mother burst into tears saying she was afraid what would happen if the child would fail. She really desperately wanted him to succeed and because of this desire has all but closed his chances of success. He is so afraid of failure that he doesn't even try. There was another one. He was really afraid of both succeeding and failing. His line of thinking went like, if I succeed, the parents would expect more. So, let's fail. Then, he will flip. If I fail, they will scold me. He led a torturous life. I have a belief that the two biggest blocks in the development of a child are his school and his parents. Most of the flaws in a kid's personality can be attributed to one of the two or both. I don't know if this counts, but I used to help tutor ESL to Spanish-speaking immigrants. There was one woman who was super focused and dedicated, and was making real improvements lesson to lesson, but she would miss massive amounts of time because she said she had to work, take care of her kid, and it really hurt her studies. She was stressed and frustrated all of the time even though she said she loved her job and was doing alright for herself. Then one day she brought her mother in because she hadn't been to tutoring in a month and needed to come, I guess. That woman was a terror. She wasn't even that old. Probably in her late 50s. She yelled at her granddaughter, who also came along, and would smack her randomly, complaining that she was so ill-behaved. It clicked that the woman was missing so much time because she had to babysit her mother just as much as her daughter. I felt so bad for her that she had such a burden, and yet so much respect that she'd go through so much to care for her mother. I work at an elementary school in a really bad part of town and I teach 3rd graders. Parents coming in reeking of pot and parents with like 5 other kids that they obviously can't care for individually are always the worst. I've had to send many kids home with the police because parents could not decide who will pick the child up. We even hold them until after 6, but mostly the children who yell, scream, curse and hit their parents will come in yelling and cursing at them. This is less dramatic than the others, but still one of those aha moments. Had an 8th grade student. Great kid, 100% responsible, academically talented, and would always speak in short clipped sentences and look like he was a frightened deer about to bolt. Had a conference with him and his parents together in which the kid was supposed to be leading the conference, reflecting on his growth and identifying his challenges. Every time the kid opened his mouth to say something, he'd get halfway through the sentence and mom would finish it for him. Poor kid was always trying to get ideas out quickly so he wouldn't be interrupted. I wasn't a teacher, but a student, and I was close to one of the caseworkers in high school. She dealt with more troubled teens, and ones that grew up with horrible parents, legal guardians and so on. However, there was this one girl, who always wore the same clothes, absolutely stunk, like no showers or brushing of teeth. She didn't brush her hair, and was quite boisterous amongst other red flags. The CW sat down with her one day, and opened the purse the girl brought, looking for a pen. Girl gave consent, and out came at least 5 cockroaches. Needless to say, my CW was taken aback as she didn't expect these vile things to come out when looking for a pen. I'm pretty sure she called social services CPS after that and they found out that her family were hoarders and neglected their well-being and their children. This is kind of different, but I thought it was sort of interesting. 2 weeks after I started high school, all the parents and students were invited to an informative tour around the school, or something like that. I do not remember, but this was at 6 PM so it was not mandatory for students to attend. I was basically the only student. We were welcomed to sit down randomly in our classroom. The interesting thing is that almost every parent took their own child's seat without knowing it, or a seat very close to it. It was so strange and I could see the similarities. Even the questions they asked. After a mom asked about the library, all I could think was that's such a ducking Sarah question to ask. Guess what, it was Sarah's mom. I teach grade 7 in the US 12-13 years olds. 13 years old student constantly in low grade trouble. The 3 Ds. Disobedience, disrespect and disruption. I shrugged it off, figuring something was up at home. Meet mom at PTC. She's obviously young. We start conference and she offers, "I'm sorry, student name is such a handful. I just don't have time to discipline him like he needs. I'm 27 and I have 5 kids." All 4 teachers in the conference can be seen subtracting 13 from 27. Whoa, you made it to the end? You're a ducking beast. I'll cut you a deal. Smash like and subscribe for more curated content, bruh. It's free and that's a great price.